Let's go to our next panel now. This is the future of generative AI. So let me introduce our guests. That would be a good start, wouldn't it? First, we have Navneet Singh, VP of Marketing Network Security at Palo Alto Networks. Also joining us, Ravi Krishnamurthy, Vice President of Product Management, AI Platform and Responsible AI at ServiceNow. Hi to you both, how are you?
Hello, everyone.
Really good. Good to see you both. And if you just make sure our mics are both up and running, that'd be fantastic. Well, to be honest, the future of Gen AI, we could fill a whole show with this particular subject, but we've got sort of half an hour to 40 minutes on this. And just a reminder to our audience, do put your questions in the chat over on that side of the screen, and I'll get through as many as we can. So let's start on the here and now before we push into the future. What I'd love to hear from both of you, from both of your experience, which is enormous, for you some of the best, most impactful, the most exciting current uses of Gen AI across different industries that you've seen. Which ones are the ones that have really excited you and you think are incredibly effective? Navneet, if we can start with you, please.
Let me start with my own industry, and then I have another example, let's say, from healthcare. So my industry is cybersecurity, as you know, right? Cybersecurity is really fascinating for the use of data and AI because we really have to be very precise and accurate in detecting threats. As you know, AI in many cases, one of the biggest problems that we associate with AI is hallucinates, right? So we can't have that detection problem or inaccuracy kind of problem in cybersecurity, and because we don't want to block anything that's benign. So that's why we invested in what we call precision AI, which is, first of all, we understood that all of the AI is only as good as its data. So we wanted to make sure that the data that we ingest is really great data, rich data, which is specific to security. And we've been collecting that data over 10 plus years. And then we invested in ML models, more than 4,000 models, which are machine learning models that are very specific to cybersecurity. So just making sure that the AI works in our favor by investing in these technologies and making AI very precise is one of the most impactful things that I have noticed in the cybersecurity industry. And if I can take another example, another very impactful example, this is more personal. So somebody I know had a case of, it's called, when we look at healthcare, we see over the last 100 or 200 years, we've been able to invest in infrastructure and resources to increase our life expectancy, right? So we've really invested a lot in vaccination and so on. Life expectancy is high. But now we see issues like cancer, for which we don't really have a cure. So imagine how impactful it would be if with AI you were able to detect cancer early enough for it to be curable. And so that's what I was fascinated with a study from University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center, which said that axillary metastasis was detected with 95% accuracy. So that's another real use case that I think will be very, very impactful for humans.
That's an incredibly exciting one that I'm sure affects everyone in some shape or form. Ravi, if I can come to you next, the examples that you've seen that have particularly excited or energized you.
Yeah, so for me, right, ServiceNow, what we are doing is across industries, elevating customer experiences and driving productivity and also helping innovation. This is across industries like telecom, financial services. For example, in government sector, public sectors, we are actually enabling governments to produce better, to provide much better citizen services while their budgets are flat. As you know, most of us, the economy is struggling, government budgets are struggling, but citizen services need to go up. So one of the things that excite me a lot is that ability for us to be able to drive public service, drive good outcomes for citizens, while at the same time being efficient and effective. The same thing applies like in banking, for example, improved self-service and resolution for claims. So at ServiceNow, we actually have 150 plus such use cases. So the thing that also excites me is by using the power of a platform where you can combine AI and automation, how you can actually make it available across all the workflows in your enterprise. So we're really helping you put your AI to work across all the business processes in your enterprise. That excites me a lot. Some recent things that excite me is that we have actually now enabled people to bring their own AI into the system. So for example, kinds of use cases Navneet talked about in healthcare or anywhere, like very sophisticated AI that we might not provide, like ServiceNow might not provide, but that's provided somewhere, but that you want to now leverage that to provide services. So for example, in manufacturing, you have some very deep defect identification and so on. That could be put into the workflow so that there is a response when you find a defect. What do you do? Do you stop the line? Do you how can you quickly resolve it, and even in many cases prevent it? So that excites me. This possibility of completely transforming business, completely transforming the way we work. That's what AI. That's the promise that it brings. The promise that I can take away a lot of these routine things that nobody enjoys doing and unleash this creativity and human potential. That's what excites me a lot.
Well, I think the word potential there is what we will start to explore next, Ravi, and I'll start with you if I can. And this is an impossible question, I freely admit it, about how do you see the use of Gen AI evolving over the next 5 to 10 years? And don't worry, I promise to put something in the diary for 10 years' time to check if you got it right. How do you think things happening?
Again, right, it's very hard. In 5 years, no one knows what's going to happen. Things go a lot faster than we think. But I think the human AI collaboration is going to be completely redefined. How we think of work is getting redefined. I think education also, like how to prepare for work also gets redefined. I think the key here, we hear a lot about agentic AI. I think this notion of an agent that's going to help you, orchestrator agents that orchestrate among multiple agents. These are all things that we have, either we are building or we are working towards. So this is, I think, one of the big developments that's going to happen. To make this happen, you do need to get data from multiple sources and contextualize that data. You also need to have governance built in, because anything that's powerful can also very powerfully go off the rails. So how do you have governance built in from the beginning to essentially drive positive outcomes and minimize or avoid negative outcomes? I think that's how I see generative AI. I see it actually evolving with both a very diverse access to data, governance built in, and these agentic systems that actually completely redefine how you work, how you think about your work, day-to-day work.
Thank you, Ravi. Navneet, the same question to you, really. How do you see things developing in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so Bill Gates had once said that people overestimate what they can achieve in 1 year, and that's why we have New Year resolutions, and many of them fail. But he said that people underestimate what they can achieve in 10 years. Right, so something very similar applies to AI as well. And I was thinking about this. If I look at some specific examples, right? I have 2 kids. One of them is in college, and one is my daughter is a high schooler. My son is in college. And when I think of them, like they're just very different. So my son is very structured, methodical, and thrives on competition. While my daughter, who's in high school, she is very social, does marching band, really inclined to music. The way they learn is very different. But the way our schooling system, as well as colleges, they teach is the same way of teaching to everyone, right? And as AI evolves, one of the applications that I think of is how can learning be adapted in a way that it's different for everyone and really helps everyone learn in the way that they deem it best. For example, maybe a TikTok video kind of for a history lesson, or a YouTube kind of video, or a gaming video for a biology lesson, and so on. So that's one. I think that's one. I think that will be transformative with AI application in education. Another, I'll come back to healthcare. This is, again, a personal example where somebody I know had a case of a brain condition called pulsatile tinnitus. So it's a rare condition where in some cases in the brain you can actually record, or there is an audio that can actually be heard by the naked ear. So I was thinking about an AI's application where they said that AI can actually be listening between all the conversations between a patient and a doctor, can assist the doctor in making better decisions. So my first reaction was this is actually invasion of privacy, right? Because these are some of the most personal discussions that we have between a patient and a doctor. But if done responsibly and with the right cybersecurity measures in place, this can transform healthcare. An example was the audible condition that I referred to. So this patient said that this is something that she's experiencing, and the doctor kind of downplayed it. And when everything was quiet, back at home, she was actually able to record this sound from using the iPhone. Went back to the doctor and had also done some research from a New York woman who had actually the same condition and had argued for her case to be evaluated. So she went back to the doctor, showed the doctor this case of the New York woman as well. And then based on that, they were able to operate her and the doctor said this was a life-changing, a life-saving operation procedure because he said that you would not have survived the rupture of this fistula. So imagine if AI was able to hear all of this, the conversation, and was able to actually, based on the sound, maybe it was able to detect that there is this condition. Some doctors may not be aware of this condition. Some doctors may be very tired when they are listening to the patient, right? They don't listen to the 100th patient the same way as they listen to the first patient at the beginning of the week. But AI does not have those limitations, right? So imagine how transformative it would be if done well and AI was able to listen to these conversations and was able to diagnose these things that are otherwise not easy.
The penny very much dropped for me when it came to AI, when someone described it as an augmenting tool to human skills. That's what was the addition there, and that's a perfect example there. You can have the most experienced and qualified doctor in the world, but if they've got that at their side, it's exciting exactly what they can achieve. You touched there, little Navneet, on sort of the ethical questions there, and I'm going to stick with that because it is the elephant in the room with every Gen AI conversation. So let's look at ethical issues going forward, things like bias, things like privacy. How do you both see that developing in the coming years as more and more Gen AI applications infuse the different software and systems that we have? Ravi, if we can start with you on that one, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so again, right, like I spoke earlier when I said governance has to be built in, responsibility has to be built into AI because it is powerful and if you can do very strange things with it as well. I think it starts with, there are many, many levels of it. It starts with how do you responsibly use data? So we are part of the AI Alliance ServiceNow, where we actually build LLMs with the most responsible, where the data provenance is clear, we have the rights to the data and so on. So it starts there, but it doesn't end there, right? Like it's also how are you using this? The way I kind of lay this out as an AI is you got to look at what is the potential for harm. And so most people kind of show these happy path demos and we all get excited. But the reality is there's 100 ways in which it could also cause harm. And so the question we ask when you look at an AI system, whether to use it or whether to deploy it, is not just does the happy path work, but have we pruned out or mitigated at least the unhappy paths or the harmful ones? So I think I have a very practical view of governance. There's a lot of philosophical things we can say, but things like ethics, things like what is morally correct, we philosophers have not been able to agree, and different cultures would have different views. So some of these are very hard to infuse into a technology. Certainly a bunch of engineers and product people are not going to do it on their own, which is why I also say AI is a cross-functional team sport. You got to have people, legal, data governance, ethics involved right at the beginning at ideation. At ServiceNow, we start with ideation. It is not a checkbox at the very end. It's got to be at ideation. Similarly, when you deploy a system, it's got to be right at the beginning. What is the system used for? And there's got to be some thought given to how could that system, what could happen? Like red teaming, as they call it, but from a very much from a user perspective, what would a user do? What could they do? How could it go wrong? Because that is a very, very practical kind of way to implement governance and responsible AI, while anchoring in principles like being human-centered, like you said, augmenting, having humans at the center of AI. AI should bring benefit to humans and bring minimal harm to human beings. Right? That's the kind of the key: being human-centered, fair, transparent, accountable, so that people deploying and developing it are accountable and providing that insight that is needed. So to me, I have a very practical view here when you think about it. Obviously, there are some things we can agree on ethically, but very practically anchoring here is how we build practical systems that meet these principles.
Thank you. Navneet, if we can come to you on that same question on ethics.
Yeah, and as Ravi said, right, do no harm would be one of the principles, but unfortunately there are bad actors and adversaries who do use AI for bad reasons. So I'm reminded of this news article about a mom in Arizona who got a call in her daughter's voice saying some bad people have kidnapped me and this is the ransom, right? So this was very, very real. And for a mom to receive a call from her teenage daughter, obviously they'd do anything to save her, right? But fortunately, they figured out it was not. They were able to get in touch with her daughter who was safe. This was just somebody who had used a deepfake to just mimic that voice. So there are just bad actors and adversaries out there, misusing AI. So I think there has to be a lot of emphasis on using AI, embracing AI, but doing it securely with the right cybersecurity measures in place. And then, as Ravi was mentioning, also, ethics. And I think one of the biggest things that I think about is the data trained responsibly? So because AI, as I said, is only as good as the data, right? So are we training the data only on a subset of people, for example, in the developed nations or within the US? Or are we doing it justice by training the data on worldwide population, including population that doesn't have ready access to AI? So I think we'll all be able to use AI best if we are able to train the data in a very diverse fashion.
Let's start looking at the impact there's going to be on different sectors, different areas. It's barely an hour goes by, I don't get another press release across my desk from a different industry promising some kind of Gen AI revolution. It is the silver bullet which solves all, apparently, at the moment. For you, which different industries do you feel are going to be most impacted, either positively or negative, by the march of Gen AI? Navneet, I'll start with you first on this one, please.
Yeah, I think that all industries, practically all industries, are going to be transformed. And I think that whether the transformation is positive or negative is really in our hands. And I'm eternally optimistic. I believe that in the long run, the effect on all industries is going to be transformative in a positive way. So the reason I chose a couple healthcare examples, I think that is one of the industries that will get transformed with AI using IoT devices. I think that's one industry that is waiting to be transformed. And second, I would say is, again, no short of industries, but manufacturing is another industry that I think is going to be transformed with various use cases like smart devices, increasing the efficiency of operations, smart devices with predictive maintenance when we manufacture, let's say, cars, and you predict when the next maintenance is due. So I think that is another industry that is going to be transformed. And then citizen services, I think Ravi started with that kind of example of citizen services. And I think government and citizen services is another area which can potentially be transformed, especially because it deals with such a large population, which requires a lot of data. So I think those are a few industries that I think will have a very positive transformative effect.
Ravi?
Yeah, I would agree with Navneet on most, and I think his Bill Gates quote of "we are underestimating the 10-year" is very apt here. I think every industry is going to be transformed dramatically. I think technology, financial services probably going the fastest, and customer operations going the fastest. But everything, even healthcare, the pace of adoption of technology in healthcare this cycle is completely different than the past. The velocity is like 4x, 5x in my experience. So I think education is another place. Public services, I think, is a complete. The expectation of the public and what people actually can deliver, what governments can deliver, will also dramatically shift. So I would agree. I think this is a very exciting time. Is it going to be good or bad? I think there's a lot. This kind of a rapid change, I think in the long run is good. I have this thing I use that AI is going to do to work what cloud did to IT. So it's actually going to unleash a lot, like the whole SaaS revolution got unleashed by cloud. Similarly, AI will unleash a whole thing, a whole revolution. But the pace of change, how do we navigate that change? How do we reskill, upskill? These are like very, very real challenges that different industries might meet. Some would meet better than others. Some would do it better than others. And I think that'll make the difference between good and bad, or good and bad in the short term, at least.
Well, you've both mentioned the importance of people, and Navneet, you've particularly mentioned sort of the education sector as well. So let's bring those two threads together if we can, because the workforce of 5 years' time, 10 years' time, they will need to understand the importance of Gen AI, how to use it, just as the switch over from, I don't know, typewriters to PCs happened. I know my mum, who was the most phenomenal touch typist you've ever met, absolutely terrifying. As soon as she suddenly had a PC in front of her, she knew that the world had changed completely and she was playing catch up. It's almost that situation again. What do you feel we need to do and have in place to make sure the workforce that is coming through for organisations such as yourselves are ready for it? Navneet, can I start with you on this, please?
Yeah, so I work in marketing. I lead marketing in cybersecurity, right? And one of the things that I was talking to somebody who is leading our creative services is that when we are hiring for a new role, in addition to reskilling existing workforce, should we create a role within marketing, which would be, let's say, a prompt engineer? Just like we talk about companies that were born in the cloud, let's look for people who were, quote unquote, born with AI. So earlier in career people who maybe are actually just graduated of college, who have used AI from almost the very, very beginning. So in addition to reskilling the existing workforce, I think we need to hire people who come with less of a quote unquote baggage of doing things the old way. So I think that creates an osmosis effect, and the existing workforce can learn from these people who are, let's say, prompt engineers, or somebody who has almost always done their assignments using AI and prompts, because it's for the last 2 to 3 years, right? Ever since ChatGPT burst onto the scene. So I think that's one area. And the second is employers have the responsibility of providing that reskill, upskilling programs for people who have been in the workforce and for whom AI does not come naturally. So I think just creating those learning opportunities, and then this osmosis from the newer, younger generation that comes into the workforce, I think the two areas which I think are most applicable.
Ravi?
Yeah, for me, I think it changes the emphasis on skills, right? From more routine skills, like I know how to do the same thing again and again, to you need to be able to think more critically, system thinking, connecting dots and coming up with uncommon insight, the ability to connect with people, empathy. These are sort of becoming more and more important. That's why I actually have an optimistic view that people say Gen AI, ChatGPT does what humans do. It does what a lot of us do most of the time. Like a lot of times we are just unconsciously doing things. ChatGPT will do that very well, or Gen AI does that very well. But this sort of uncommon insight, those things, it is completely human. And I think this will kind of force us to become better human beings. That's my sort of my hopeful view of the future. So I think part of reskilling, again, like Navneet said, some of it is coming from outside, but it really is coming from inside for us, because domain expertise is very hard to get from outside. Like Gen AI came, but what didn't change is the problems you're solving. The problems you're solving is, how do I give an outstanding experience? How do I do it at lower cost with higher productivity? And how do I increase my pace of innovation? This is the problem we've been solving for 20 years, and we're still using Gen AI as a tool to solve this problem. So I think it's more like how to use it, what to do. That's what changes. I'll take my example as a PM, right? The kind of skills I look for in a PM today, and I've been doing this for a few years because I sort of viewed AI PMs as having to be different. Much more data literacy is much more critical. This ability to do system thinking is critical. Framing up decisions by connecting dots across, like I said, in AI, decisions involve legal, governance, your operations, geographies, technology, all of this, connecting them together. That's the kind of skill I look for. Not a traditional PM who would go talk to 20 people, gather requirements, and then stack rank them, right? We do that too, but you now need to be able to do much more complex tasks. So I think that's the evolution. And but again, when you have people who have good domain expertise and good knowledge, I think they can ride this curve pretty fast, especially if they take advantage of these technologies as they do so.
Absolutely. And I don't know about you two, but I see plenty of CVs when they cross my desk, and it's actually refreshing when you see a cover letter that hasn't been written with Gen AI. That, for me, that actually puts them higher up the list of candidates, because it shows creativity, and you don't actually have to use ChatGPT to write a letter. But anyway, that's a separate conversation altogether. Let's move on to regulation if we can, because it's something we've touched on a few times during the conversation. For you, what role should governments play in regulating Gen AI going forward? And obviously there's the regional differences here, whether it's here in the US, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in Asia. What are our thoughts on that, about the role of regulation going forward? Ravi, if we can start with you on this one, please.
Yeah, I think a technology this powerful does need regulation. But I think the key also is many times what happens with the regulation is it is written by and written in a way to favor the big players. And then it stifles innovation. So I think when we like I said, governance built in is a very critical principle for us. I think that applies at the societal level as well. But governance should be an accelerator. We have actually found governance as an accelerator because it keeps us from getting gummed up down the road. So the same way when governments regulate, they should regulate in a way that, and also provide the ability for smaller players and others to meet the regulations and manage risks. I also think we should not take a purely a checkbox kind of view to regulation, which is kind of what we do. We want to get a checklist and check them off. What we really should be is like a principle like Navneet said, right? Like do no harm. Like those are the kind of are we doing our best to minimize harm? Are we doing our best to maximize ROI while minimizing harm? Those are the kinds of things we need to check on. So it actually changes, in my mind, even how we regulate needs to change, at least from a mindset perspective, to be successful.
Thank you, Ravi. Navneet, we can go to you next, please.
Yeah, I think I agree with Ravi that a technology that is this transformative does require some regulation and governance. But at the same time, I think the best governance can come from public-private partnership. And you really need to have somebody from the government point of view who can look at the broader picture on how it affects various industries, but you also need to have participation and representation from the industries that actually innovate. And I was looking at a very, very interesting example of a kind of job that was created by AI. It's a granny that has been created by O2 in the UK, I think. So what they do is that give the example of a scammer, right? Somebody who was able to use the deepfake voice earlier. So this is using AI for the good. So what they do is they've created a granny who would keep the scammers on the phone for an hour and just waste their time. So if you know of somebody who is a scammer or a spam call that comes to you, you can send their number to this organization, and they would create this AI granny who will receive calls from this number, these spam calls, and would just keep them on for an hour or more. So every hour that they spend with this person is an hour that the bad person is not able to spend with somebody else trying to scam them. So I think this kind of an innovation doesn't come from just regulation, right? So that's why it's really, really important for us to have a public-private partnership when we are developing ethical use of AI and governance and regulation around it.
Navneet, that's a fantastic example there with the granny, although it does spoil my fun slightly. I once kept a scammer who contacted me on Facebook about some kind of heating scam going for, I think it was around 48 hours. I think in the end he did get sick of me, but it was fun while it lasted. It kept him busy, but I think the granny option is considerably better. Before I go to a whole host of questions we've had in from the audience, a couple of more industry-specific questions for each of you, because you come from quite different areas. Ravi, if I can start with you. Obviously, you're more from the business process management side of things. For you, how do you feel Gen AI is going to help in that area? There's obviously low-hanging fruit, which is being worked with at the moment. How do you see that growing over time once we've solved the easy-to-solve areas of business process management?
Yeah, I think, workflows across the enterprise, I think 5-10x productivity is possible, and we'll see it in the very near time frame. We are building like agentic systems with humans in the loop. The idea is that you actually manage a set of bots that is doing the work for you, and you're orchestrating. This is not science fiction. We're actually building this with guardrails and so on. So what that means is every knowledge worker, whatever business process, wherever they're working in, can be 10 times more productive. So that's where I see this going. What does that mean in specific instances? So for example, we start with service delivery. In any service delivery, this means that now that huge backlog that you have, you can innovate and you can work on while you have these bots dealing with all of the routine questions. So the level of service that you provide, for example, in public sector or in financial services or in technology, media, or telecommunications just goes up dramatically. So that's what I see across. And what, like I said, just like how cloud unleashed. I am old enough that the first startup I did is I went to Fry's nearby, which is an electronics store. We bought a bunch of computers, put them under our desks, and got started. Nobody does that anymore, right? It just takes 5 clicks to get started. I had to install so many things, antivirus, version control, none of that, right? It gets started. In the same way, if I'm going to be 10 times productive in my routine tasks, what is that going to unleash in me, in my team? It's hard for me to just imagine, but we are seeing, even today already, we are seeing tens of millions of analyzed savings from Gen AI when you use our platform. And these are just like 5 or 10 early use cases. We already have 150 plus solutions. And these are not increasing productivity 10x yet, as we add more multimodal and so on. So literally we have scratched the surface and we're already seeing massive business gains. This is going to change industries as a whole. That's where I see it going.
Yeah, it's such an exciting time. I often use the expression, we're not in the spring of this technology. We've barely passed New Year. The Christmas decorations are still up, if we're going to use that analogy a bit further. Navneet, if I can come to you from a cybersecurity point of view, is it something of a race? Because as useful as Gen AI is to help with cybersecurity, as you mentioned earlier with the bad actors, they also have access to this technology. Is it a race between the two parties to a degree to see who can get the most use and benefit out of this?
Yeah, I think the sad part about all of these technological innovations, whether it's cloud computing, it's more computing power availability. Now it's AI. In the future, maybe quantum computing. The thing is, with the democratization of technology, this is available not only to the good actors, but also available equally to the bad actors, especially with now nation states getting involved who are very, very well funded, right? So that's available to the same technologies are available to the bad actors. But I think our chief product officer recently gave a talk which says the security is solvable. And we are very optimistic. And the reason for that is that if you go one level deeper into cybersecurity, the bad actors have to do many, many things and do them right to be successful. So they first have to do a reconnaissance. Then they need to install some software that is malware. Then they need to do lateral movement to get to the data, which is sensitive data. Then they need to establish command and control communication. Then they need to exfiltrate all the data. All of these steps are very similar to steps that somebody takes in a war or a battle kind of situation. But the good part about about this whole fight is that good people just have to disrupt one of these steps, and they will be successful in preventing a breach. So we have multiple ways, multiple opportunities to disrupt this attack life cycle. And that's why we believe that that security is solvable, because we are looking at how people do reconnaissance, how they install malicious systems, and how do they spread laterally to try to get to sensitive data. Once they have the sensitive data, how do they establish communication with their command and control server? And then how do they start exfiltrating that data? If we are able to disrupt any of these, we deploy technologies to disrupt all of them. We just have to be successful once, and we'll be able to prevent a breach from happening. So we do believe security is solvable if AI is used in this way and used correctly.
Absolutely. Right, let's crack on with some of these questions that are coming in thick and fast. I apologise if I don't get to yours because we've had a fair few. So, gents, if we can keep these answers relatively quick fire, I'd be very, very grateful so we can get through as many as possible. Let's start with Ken Turner. Hi, Ken. Thank you. Ken asks, how can Gen AI improve software development? I guess that's an interesting point about where we're beginning. Ravi, if I can start with you on that one.
Yeah, we do a lot of work in this. We actually released one of the top code models, StarCoder, and we've continued to work on it. Again, it's two ways. One is for less experienced coders, it suggests code and kind of guides them on good practices. But the big wins are actually with the more experienced coders, where very routine things that could be missed kind of comes in there, so their cognitive load goes down, so they can be more productive and focus on the higher tasks.
Thank you very much. Navneet, over to you.
Yeah, if I can just take a step back, I'm not a coder, but I'll take a step back and give a higher level answer. So today we think of Gen AI as being able to help customers. For example, if the baggage is lost, right? Somebody asks a customer, and the customer agent is actually AI, which is helping the customer. So that can be improved. But I think the real win is actually a higher level bit, which is how do we prevent the baggage from being lost in the first place? So I think that's where the creativity comes in. And the great part about AI is that it can enable coders and non-coders to be able to create such applications as long as you have that creative idea. So I think with the democratization of just creativity and being able to develop these kind of software applications, because AI is writing the software, you just come in with an idea. I think that is going to really transform the way systems are built.
It accelerates that creativity. That's what really excites me there. Right, let's crack on with some other questions. Let's go to some of the ones that have been upvoted quite highly. Haven't got a name for this one, but it's a great question. Do you think any shift to agentic AI will be rooted first in the enterprise area, things like via MS, Copilot, and so on, or more grassroots engagement with individuals? How do you think that'll settle? Ravi, if I can go with you.
Could you repeat that question? So you're saying, how does agentic AI impact grassroots?
Yeah, do you think it'll be rooted?
Individuals?
Sorry, yeah. Do you think agentic AI will be rooted first in the enterprise area, or more grassroots engagement with individuals?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. Navneet, if you caught the question, go ahead. And
let me try and reword that. Do you think the agentic AI will be rooted first in enterprise areas, maybe sort of more behind the scenes, or customer facing?
Yeah. That's how I see it, because, but again, there is the flip side, which is in more grassroots, the tasks are simpler. So I think the simple tasks, agentic AI that do simple things would be more grassroots to begin with. It can be used more grassroots with maybe human input, but the more complex agentic systems will happen in the enterprise to begin with.
Thank you very much. Yeah, apologies for the question there. I know it's often quite difficult with these connections. Navneet, over to you for the final word on that, please.
Yeah, I think it'll transform both, right? So I think it remains to be seen which one comes first, but there are signs to indicate that it is going to be transformative in enterprises, because I think there is more of a push from the management, including our organization, to see how we can use, for example, Copilot, not just to answer questions that customers are asking, because cybersecurity is inherently complex, but how do we take are we able to automate the task? How are we able to take actions? And initially, when we start taking action on behalf of the users, they're not as comfortable, but we need to build that trust by taking actions in a precise way. And also another concept, which is explainable AI, which is explain the rationale for doing something. So I think as we invest more in these concepts, like explaining why we are taking some action, I think some of these things will be more easily trusted, and it'll happen in enterprises specifically.
Okay, Ravi, Navneet, thank you so much for joining me today. We are out of time. We are going to have to move on, but thank you so much for joining us here at Tech and AI Live New York.
Thank you. It was fantastic.
Thank you all. Thank you for having us. Yeah.
Very, very welcome.